Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. It is a Type XIIa.19 from Angus Trim. And a couple things to note before I get into the review. One, it is a review sample that was provided for free, so if you think that makes me biased, then you know at the start. I do also have to send this one back, though, so bear in mind I will not be doing destructive testing or anything like that. I'll swing it around and give you a visual tour and the like, but I will not be breaking it as I might do on some other reviews. The other bit to note is that I don't study historic European martial arts, and so while I do study swordsmanship, and while there are some perhaps universal truths, and the pointy end goes in the other guy, I don't know how to move this one around with its specific systems and intent and yada yada yada. So anyway, my musings and ramblings are that I'm a novice. Anyway, I'll start the review by saying I don't actually know how much this is. I have yet to ask Angus Trim, and I'll put that description in the description down below. But I'm going to suspect it's around $1,000 to $1,200 retail for what this sword would be. That tends to be the ballpark that I see his swords in, which puts it for a sword without a scabbard in the higher end price category of modern quasi-mass production type swords that are out there. Now, Angus Trim, he designed some things for other brands. You might see, designed by Angus Trim on some Kingston Arms lines, but he also manufactures swords himself, and the ones that are kind of from him directly are the higher end pieces, and they're, I would say, more of a custom made sword in that each one of them kind of gets its own individual attention from the man himself. And he's pretty particular. If you've ever seen anything he's written about swords, about the nuances of dynamics and balance and how a sword should feel and act. And so each one of them kind of gets that individualized attention about how a sword should feel and act, and that is certainly something that you feel in your hand when you get them, and part of what makes them special. Anyway, it's among the higher price category, but if you look at them as custom objects, one-of-a-kind pieces, then they are on the lesser side of the custom pieces that you might be able to buy out there, because surprising as it might be, $1,000 or $1,200 does not get you much in the realm of custom handmade objects anymore. Anyway, that said, I'm going to give you a visual tour. I'll cut with it, and then I'll ramble about if I think it's worth that ballpark or not. And I'll also try to actually give you the specifics about what this one would cost if you wanted to buy it, which I'm sure it will be for sale at some point. Also, as a point of a note, I believe Philip Martin may have reviewed this one. Angus said that he sent it to Phil, or it had some association with Phil Martin. So if I can find the video of a XIIa channel cutting with this one, I will put that in the description down below as well, so you can see what it does in more competent hands than mine. Anyway, with that in mind, I'm going to begin the visual tour, if you will. So I'm going to begin at the end. Soup to nuts, top to bottom is how I tend to go. So I'm going to begin at this peen block right here. And what I can say is it looks elegant and nice. It has some sharp ledges that don't feel particularly great on my delicate paws. What I will say, though, is I think this is a nut and fixed like a peen a little bit. I don't know. I have to ask Angus exactly how he does it. But it has an elegant look to it, certainly. And this nut, which I believe is the centerpiece here, is ground down in such a way where I feel like I could make it softer if I wanted to, but I don't want to because it's not mine. If I were to keep it, though, then this would have to go, because it definitely pulls into my skin and could lose me a few layers of epidermis pretty quickly, the way I tend to hold wheel pommels. The good news is the wheel pommel is small enough to grab. It has a nice blued texture to it. That blued textured also, or the bluing on it is evenly done. I don't spot kind of spots or stains or something like that. Sometimes bluing can be blotchy, and it all looks pretty clean on this one. It's a simple wheel pommel. It has raised middle sections here, but it doesn't have any dimension the opposite direction. So sometimes they taper in one direction or the other. In this case, it's flat in the opposite dimension. But overall, it lines up with the grip really well. There's no schmutz or yucky bits on it. What I will say about the overall wheel pommel, though, is that it's sharp. It's not comfortable to hold. So if you grip the pommel, in this particular case, it is not comfortable. The edges are sharp enough where they kind of bite into me and cause enough discomfort that they could tear some skin. Now, the outer edge of the wheel pommel is not so bad. The inner edge of the rise section is debatably sharp. I can kind of pull some fingernail off with it, and the peen is sharp, as in, I can cut a little bit with it. It just hasn't been softened, and I think Angus, when I was talking to him, and his impression of the pommel is, it's not to be grabbed. Maybe I don't want to speak for the guy. He knows swords better than I do, but I would advocate softening this one, which I'm hesitant to do on this because, one, it's not mine, but if it were, it would diminish the bluing if I were to do it on this inner ledge, which I would really need to do to be comfortable. I tend to grab wheel pommels. That's a thing I do. One of the reasons I prefer the fishtail or scent stopper pommels. I'm not a huge fan of the wheel ones, though I'm not studying a particular style of martial art or something that would advocate me using a kind of period correct sword. So anyway, the point is though that this one is a bit sharp. It's a very long-winded way to say that, but that's what I'm getting at. And I don't think it has a huge amount of dimension for a sword in this price category. I think, you know, grinding slightly one way or the other might add a little bit of class to it, and certainly softening the edges a little bit for people with delicate, sensitive skin like myself. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the grip. I really like the grip. Short bit to say. It has the dimension that I'm looking for, and that it has an elliptical bit towards the crossguard, and it kind of narrows but is still elliptical towards the pommel, which I like. I don't like when they turn completely round. This aids in kind of moving the sword around and switching edges, but you can still index it. The risers are prominent. There's 4 of them, and it has this kind of soft, supple, and grippy feeling all at once. It has the nice cord wound bits to it, and I don't spot any imperfections. The seam is one that I can spot, and I can kind of just barely get with my finger. If I want to put a fingernail on it, I can, but overall I would say it's pretty well done, and not something that is easy to notice coloration-wise unless I put it in a really, really bright light. But it has this very welcoming feeling to it, the grip. It's hard if I really squeeze down on it, but I can feel a little give in the leather with my fingers. Not so much that it bubbles or moves or anything like that, but it's warm and inviting and wants me to grip it. It's a comfortable thing to hold on to with one hand, and I feel like the grip, the way it's shaped, lets me index well, and it aids in me holding it in just about any space that I want, unless it is anywhere near this ledge of the wheel pommel, because as you can see, if I put my hand down here and it even touches the fat of my hand into the side of this wheel pommel, it can really grab on. Well, it grabs my skin, and if I get near this peen block, it bites into me. But I've talked about that already. Anyway, grip, easy to index, very comfortable, has a nice supple feeling, appears very well manufactured, and I don't spot any bumps or anything that isn't supposed to be there. The seam is maybe a little more prominent than it could be. It's nice and soft, and the lines from the twine that is wrapped around it when it's lacquered, I believe, are really even and well done. It's overall a great presentation. Now, if I talk about the crossguard, it has similar bluing as the pommel does, and the edges, again, on this one are chamfered. You can spot if you're being really anal some areas where it's not perfectly symmetrical or even. It has an element of handmadeness to it, but overall it's actually really quite even and very, very precise. It has overall even transitions, and you really have to be really picky to notice any kind of asymmetry to it. It is there, but very, very difficult to spot. It has nice bluing, again, even and well done. If I choke up on the guard and run my delicate, sensitive skin across it, it bites a little bit. Not a whole lot, though. And as you can hear, everything on here is really tight and well secured. Transitions up from the grip, again, no schmutzy bits. And if I look in the gap here where the blade meets the cross, there's a larger opening, which the shoulders of the blade rest on, and then I can make out where the tang runs through. I can see it all. It's a bigger gap than, I guess, the closest competitor would be Albion, which is known for having pretty tight tolerances here. But overall, it looks even, well done, and nice. I would like to see a perfectly machined out gap that only matched the specifics of the blade. But as it is, it's certainly fine and nice looking, though I would argue it could be smaller. It is nice to see, though, that the opening for the tang is what is in there. That is smaller, and the blade shoulders resting on the guard is something that I can spot here. How easy it is to get water and stuff in there, I guess I don't know. There's enough spot to maybe kind of clean it out, but anyway, I can at least see that the blade is resting on the shoulders of the crossguard, or the shoulders of the blade are resting on the crossguard and not, going all the way through. I can make out that spot where they sit. Anyway, on to the pointy stabby part, this 12A. Now, again, I'm going to put dimensions and specifications and all that stuff in the description down below. What I can see is I've got a fuller that runs roughly, probably about 3/4 of the way up the blade. It's very prominent. The grinding on this blade, I've seen a few and had a few Angus trim swords over the years. I still own a couple of them. The rippling on the surface of this is cleaner than has been in some of the other swords. This is, I think, one of the best ground examples that I have. There's some surface ripples from hand grinding, but overall it's reasonably clean, and the edge has some very minor spots where it kind of juts and wanders a little bit, but overall very keen and straight lines. The dimensions, though, are what maybe Angus trim is prized for. It has a nice clean taper to it. Angus really knows how dynamically a blade should feel, or at least he has a vision for it and is capable of executing it and delivering it in a product consistently, and that's part of what his stuff is known for. And this is no exception. I can see command of the taper of the blade, and you certainly feel it in your hand, though I'll talk about feeling in just a second. This one is pretty flexible, has a lot of give. I have to be cautious, though. It's obscenely sharp and has quasi central ridge section, though the center ridge is soft, though I believe that's intentional. There's a lot of grind lines and stuff on here, so it has kind of a shiny surface, but I would say it's still satin. I can make out tool markings and the like, particularly in the fullers. And if that's something that bothers you, know that it's not perfect. I imagine you could take it apart if you wanted to and make it shinier if that was a thing, but finishing is tough to make it, to bring it to that final level of shiny polish. What I do notice as well is where the fuller is made, there's almost like a flat section where the fuller is ground in, and I see it kind of waver a little bit around the fuller. There's a slight flat section, which hopefully you're able to see in the video, and it kind of ebbs and flows just a little bit. Now, you don't notice it as you're looking down. The fuller appears straight. It appears to terminate in the same spot, but some of those flats are wider or thinner as they are resting and running parallel with the fuller. They vary in thickness a little bit. Anyway, taper-wise, it begins to have a steeper taper right after the fuller, coming down to a reasonably fine point where the blade meets the cross. It has this very thick, unpolished, or not unpolished, unsharpened section that doesn't really begin maybe about 6 inches up the blade. So if you want to put a finger over the guard or something like that, you can. If you parry with this spot right here or meet another blade, it's thick and reinforced, and it keeps some of the weight a little bit more towards the grip, lending this sword to having a feeling which is very, very comfortable, very controllable. Now, I don't feel exactly connected to the tip. It's not as though I feel like I could trim your eyelashes with it, but I do feel like I'm connected right to the midsection of the blade, kind of is that where the blade note is? Yeah, pretty much just above the blade note is kind of where I feel connected, and it feels like I could be very precise in what I was trying to cut, which I think is maybe more the intent of this blade. The blade is certainly a performance cutter. I cut pool noodles with it, and it's just effortless to move around and cut with it. It has a very keen, fine edge. I don't recall Angus trim blades coming with this particular type of edge on it, so maybe it's something that you can request from him, but this is certainly a very, very keen, very, very sharp blade. And cutting pool noodles, it popped them right apart and was just effortless to cut with. Anyway, in terms of finish, very simple mono steel finish, kind of a satin color to it, and the polishing along the edges kind of gives it gives the secondary bevel a little bit of zazz to it. But overall, a very, very handsome blade. And you can hear it has a nice ring to it. Everything's nice and tight. Anyway, in terms of moving it around, I've done precious little cutting with it, but what I can tell you, again, I mentioned the pool noodle, it cut exceedingly well. I've cut a variety of other targets, and I'll overlay the video here for you to see, but what I would say is that if I'm cutting soft to medium targets, it excels at that cutting. It does it pretty effortlessly. My bad cutting on water bottles might cause a few of them to fly off into here or there, but that's really more me than the sword. Every now and again, it gives a very, very polite little ring to let me know that it's a that it can ring, I suppose. I don't know if that happens when I do a good cut or a bad one, but it's a pleasant sound nonetheless. If I do thicker cuts or anything like that, if I cut into something more robust, which I'm not doing in this particular video, it doesn't necessarily sing through them. Branches and some small things are all I'm really comfortable cutting with a sword that I'm supposed to send back in good condition. If I were to cut something more robust, I don't know how well this would fare. It has a reasonable amount of give. Likewise, if I'm thrusting, it's got enough thrust to go into most things that I'm gonna poke with it, water bottles and the like. But if it were to stop, it has a reasonable amount of flex. So I don't know how great at thrusting it is. Certainly good enough to thrust into a tatami mat or a pool noodle or water bottle, but it's probably not gonna be very effective against something more robust, thicker anyway. All right, sword friends, it's the part of the video where I answer the question, do I personally think it's worth it or not? $1,200 is not a small amount of money, but it's easy to say yes in this case. It was fun to move around. It's a well-built object. I could do without some of the sharpness on the pommel and maybe even soften the grip from my delicate sausage fingers. But at the same time, it's easy to say yes. Angus Trim is a very competent, knowledgeable, respected swordsmith, and he takes these swords and tunes them in such a way that you get all that expertise and knowledge in a product in your hand. And that's a special thing. Not every manufacturer has that level of expertise and knowledge. Not everyone is spending as much time kind of making sure that you get the nuances of dynamics that they're hoping for in your hand, like Angus Trim does. All of the swords that I've had from him have had a particular feeling to them. They've evolved and grown over time, but I can say that every sword that I've held from Angus Trim, made by him, not necessarily just designed and manufactured by somebody else, but made by him, has had a kind of a dynamic charm to it that makes it endearing and hard to sell. Anyway, I am going to be loath to send this one back, but it has been really fun to cut with. I won't lie, though, $1,200 is a substantial amount of money, and there are other offerings on the market. Namely, Albion comes to mind. At least my mind is the closest competitor that has something similarly priced in that ballpark. And so if you ask me, would I rather have this or an equivalent Albion Type 12, well, I suppose that's going to actually depend a little bit on what the intended usage is. I don't have, unfortunately, a Baron or a Duke, which I believe are the Albion models that are a Type 12A like this one is supposed to be. So I can't compare them evenly, but I do have a Steward, which is similar, and it depends. Still, if I'm hanging it on a wall, I like the look of the Albion. It has some refinement in the grip and some differences in machine-made perfection that I happen to aesthetically like. And it also is no slouch in the hand. It feels very good. If I'm actually going out and using it and cutting stuff, dynamically, I prefer the Angus Trim. It has a sense of liveliness that is not present to the same degree in the Albion. This one has a particular razor edge that moves through targets out of the box. The Albions that I've had or have gotten over time don't have the same edge refinement on them. You have to sharpen them if you want to do some of the soft target cutting as effectively as this Angus Trim performs in. Also, the grip, while the Albion tends to have a more refined looking grip and it tends to look zazzier on a wall, it doesn't necessarily index as well, and it doesn't feel as warm and inviting as this one does. I kind of like whatever grip is on here has a very warm and comfortable feeling to my hands until I get towards that pommel, which wants to shred my hands. I digress, though. I prefer this one to my Steward anyway. In terms of aesthetics, I think I prefer my Steward to the Angus Trim. Neither one of them are bad in either category, though. But if I'm comparing and contrasting the two products, then they are different. Either one is good. And maybe you'll like the feel of the Albion more, but I happen to like the very nimble, fun feeling that this sword provides. And I also like some of the little nuances to it. Like I mentioned, I like the grip more in my hand. I like that I can finger the guard. When I'm attacking a tatami mat, it's not swinging back at me. So if I want to finger the guard, I'm in no jeopardy of having that finger removed accidentally by an errant sword strike that I have to block. Having the option and not having it be uncomfortable with the thicker ricasso section down here is nice. Anyway, those are my thoughts for whatever they're worth. I really enjoyed the sword. Special thanks to Angus Trim for sending it my way. It's been a pleasure to swing it around. And again, I'm gonna be loath to send it back. I'm gonna swing it around a little bit more before I do. Anyway, that's all I've got. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.